Of migrants in the developing world can be a dangerous one. And according to a new investigation by the Associated Press, it can also be deadly. At least 61,000 migrants have gone missing or died since 2014. Many of them are young teenage girls who are lured away from home with promising jobs. Kristen Gelineau wrote the article and is the AP bureau chief for Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific. She joins me now from Sydney. Kristen, so how do these girls get recruited in the first place?
Yeah, well, first for a little bit of context, this region that we were reporting in, East Nusa Tenggara, is one of the poorest and driest parts of Indonesia. It has a very high unemployment rate, and most people work as subsistence farmers. So getting a job in Malaysia is like winning the lottery. You can make more money in a couple years in Malaysia than you could in a lifetime in this region. So field recruiters will often just turn up at a village, and most of the time these recruiters have some sort of connection to the village and indeed to the victims themselves. They could be a family member, they could be a friend of a friend, and that makes them seem trustworthy. So they come in with these offers. They say, I've got this great job for you. You can work as a maid. It'll be easy work for about $200 a month, which is a fortune to these girls. And they are mostly targeting teenage girls. They also say, we'll take care of all the paperwork. These girls are too young to legally migrate for work, so the recruiters end up forging their details, their birth dates, sometimes their names and addresses, so they can get the paperwork required to go. So to the girls, it seems like a great deal, and they agree, and then they leave, and sometimes they never come back.
Well, so they get these coveted jobs once they're recruited, then what happens to them?
At that point, they are passed up through a chain of agents in this trafficking network. So sometimes they're bounced from one locked house to the next, not allowed to go outside, not allowed to use a phone, waiting for somebody in Malaysia to buy them. Sometimes at that point, they get passed over into Malaysia to work as maids for families. And in some cases, they work in slave-like conditions. They're underpaid, they're overworked, sometimes they're abused, and other girls can be forced into prostitution.
Wow, so not so coveted once the reality sinks in. The International Organization for Migration put out data saying more than 3,000 migrants have died just this year, but you say that is probably a conservative count. Why?
Yeah, it's certainly an undercount. Previously, the IOM was the only group that had ever tried to come up with a global tally of how many migrants have died or disappeared over the years. And they're the first to admit it's an undercount because many of these cases simply are not reported. They came up with a figure of 28,000 migrants since 2014 who have died or disappeared, but it's mostly focused on the Mediterranean. So over the past year, my colleagues and I at the AP have been trying to come up with a more comprehensive tally. And from studying forensic reports, death records, data gleaned from interviews with thousands of migrants, we ended up with a figure of more than 61,000, which is over double the IOM's count. But again, that is an undercount because many of these cases just are never reported to officials. And
again, because these girls are poor and they're almost an invisible population. So what can governments or law enforcement agencies do to better protect against this?
Right. Well, activists will say, number one, it's a matter of economics, job opportunities. If there are job opportunities in the region, people don't need to take these risky jobs in the first place. The second part of it, though, is education. So in this region, it's a majority Christian population, and the church has actually become one of the main advocates for these migrants and for these trafficked girls. So they go around trying to hold meetings in village after village to warn people about these illegal recruiters, show them the danger. There's a nun I interviewed that actually brings a video with her that shows pictures of all of the coffins that have been returned to the province over the past few years that contain the remains of migrants who have died on these journeys.
The numbers and those pictures are disturbing, obviously. Do you expect this problem, though, to get worse or better this next year?
It's tough to know for sure. Certainly, global migration is increasing every year, and with more migrants taking these journeys, more migrants are facing risks. But if you just look at this one province, East Nusa Tenggara, if you look at the numbers, over the past few years, the number of migrants that have returned to the province in coffins has increased every year. So last year there were 62, and this year there's already about 100.
Go away for a promising job, come home in a coffin. So sad. Kristen Gelineau, thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.